Here we go with a story that's going to absolutely shake you. We're talking about one of the most catastrophic corporate exits in American energy history. ExxonMobil, the biggest oil company in the United States, just walked away from California operations and took a staggering $2.5 billion loss to do it. That's not a mistake. $2.5 billion gone. Just to escape one state. This isn't some minor business adjustment or strategic repositioning. This is a full-scale retreat, a corporate evacuation so desperate that they literally sold infrastructure worth billions for pennies on the dollar. And the ripple effects of this decision are going to impact every single person living in California, whether they realize it or not. Let me set the stage for you. January 4th, 2024. That's the date when ExxonMobil dropped the bombshell announcement that sent shockwaves through the entire energy industry. After operating in California for 56 years, after building some of the most advanced offshore drilling infrastructure in the world, after establishing operations that powered the state's economy for more than half a century, they're done. Finished, and they're willing to absorb a multi-billion-dollar loss just to get out. Think about what that means for a second. This is the most profitable oil company on the planet. They operate in war zones. They drill in Arctic conditions. They work in countries with unstable governments and questionable legal systems. But California was too much. The business environment became so hostile, so unpredictable, so economically punishing that taking a $2.5 billion bath was actually the better option. The numbers behind this sale are absolutely mind-blowing. ExxonMobil sold assets that were originally worth billions of dollars for just $643 million. That works out to roughly 25 cents on the dollar. They gave away decades of investment, cutting-edge technology, and proven reserves at a loss so severe it's hard to even comprehend. And this wasn't some hasty decision made in a boardroom panic. This was the culmination of years of frustration, mounting costs, regulatory battles, and a complete inability to operate profitably in an increasingly hostile regulatory environment. So what exactly are we talking about when we say infrastructure? Let me paint you a picture of what's actually sitting out there in the Pacific Ocean right now, idle and deteriorating. The Santa Ynez unit includes 3 massive offshore platforms named Hondo, Heritage, and Harmony. These structures sit 5 to 9 miles off the coast of Santa Barbara in federal waters. And when I say massive, I mean truly colossal. Platform Hondo alone stands 850 feet tall. To put that in perspective, that's taller than a 75-story building rising out of the ocean. These aren't the small oil derricks you might picture from old movies. These are floating engineering marvels, essentially self-contained cities in the middle of the sea. The engineering specifications of these platforms are nothing short of extraordinary. Platform Hondo weighs 58,000 tons. The deck alone covers an area equivalent to 3 football fields. It houses complete living quarters for 80 workers at a time, a helicopter landing pad for crew rotations and emergency evacuations, drilling equipment worth hundreds of millions, processing facilities that separate oil from water and gas, water treatment plants that handle enormous volumes, and electrical generators capable of powering a small town. The platform's legs are driven 300 feet into the ocean floor, anchored in bedrock. The entire structure is designed to withstand 100-foot waves and magnitude 7.5 earthquakes. This is world-class engineering at its absolute finest, representing billions in capital investment and decades of technological development. The Santa Ynez field itself covers 112 active wells spread across 76,000 acres of ocean floor. Between 1981 and 2014, this single field produced 671 million barrels of oil. During the peak years in the 1990s, production hit 45,000 barrels per day. Natural gas production during that same period peaked at 35 million cubic feet per day, which is enough energy to heat 350,000 homes continuously. The field still contains proven reserves estimated at 200 million barrels remaining in the ground. That's 200 million barrels that could be extracted with existing infrastructure and known technology, and ExxonMobil is walking away from all of it. Each of these platforms represents a different era of technological advancement. Platform Harmony was revolutionary when it was installed in 1981. It pioneered the use of subsea completion technology, where the valve assemblies known as Christmas trees sit on the ocean floor rather than on the platform deck itself. This innovation allowed operators to drill 24 wells from a single platform, dramatically increasing efficiency and reducing environmental footprint per barrel produced. Platform Heritage, added in 1989, introduced horizontal drilling capabilities to California offshore operations. This technology allows drilling sideways for up to 8,000 feet, accessing oil pockets located miles away from the platform's actual location. This is technology that took decades and billions of dollars to develop and perfect. The onshore facilities are equally impressive and equally abandoned. The Las Flores Canyon facility spreads across 134 acres and includes a crude oil treatment plant that separates water and gas from oil with a processing capacity of 140,000 barrels per day. The natural gas processing plant removes hydrogen sulfide and carbon dioxide, producing pipeline-quality gas ready for immediate commercial use. The cogeneration power plant burns natural gas to produce 25 megawatts of electricity, enough to power 20,000 homes continuously while the facility operates. Storage tanks hold 540,000 barrels of oil, using specialized floating roof designs specifically engineered to minimize emissions and environmental impact. The facility's water treatment system deserves special attention because it's particularly advanced. It processes 200,000 barrels of produced water daily, removing hydrocarbons and suspended solids to levels that meet discharge standards, actually stricter than most municipal wastewater treatment plants. The control room looks like something out of a space mission, with operators monitoring 3,000 different sensors and alarms across the entire operation 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This is genuinely state-of-the-art infrastructure representing not just billions in initial investment, but decades of continuous refinement and technological improvement. And right now, all of it sits completely idle, slowly deteriorating from salt corrosion and neglect. So what happened? Why would the world's most profitable oil company abandon this extraordinary asset base? The answer begins on May 19, 2015. That's the day a pipeline owned by Plains All-American Pipeline ruptured near Refugio State Beach. The break released 142,800 gallons of crude oil into the Pacific Ocean and on to nearby beaches. Now here's a critical detail that often gets overlooked in the retelling of this story. The pipeline carried oil from ExxonMobil's platforms, yes, but the pipeline itself was not owned or operated by ExxonMobil. It belonged to a completely different company. Yet the moment that pipeline broke, ExxonMobil's production stopped immediately, and it has been stopped ever since. Nearly 10 years of complete shutdown over a pipeline failure they didn't cause in infrastructure they didn't own. The financial bleeding from this shutdown has been absolutely catastrophic. ExxonMobil spends $80 million annually just maintaining these idle facilities. Let that sink in for a moment. $80 million every single year just to keep empty platforms from falling apart. That maintenance includes 24-hour monitoring by a crew of 35 people who do nothing but watch equipment that produces nothing. Corrosion prevention systems continuously inject chemicals into every pipe and vessel to prevent saltwater deterioration. Monthly helicopter inspections of the platforms cost a fortune in aviation fuel and pilot time. Quarterly diving inspections of underwater structures require specialized saturation divers who command premium wages. Emergency response teams remain on constant standby, ready for incidents that never happen because nothing is actually operating. And insurance premiums run $15 million per year just for non-operating facilities that generate zero revenue. Over 10 years of forced shutdown, that's $800 million in pure maintenance costs, with absolutely no revenue coming in to offset it. But the maintenance costs are just the beginning of the financial nightmare. Add the lost revenue to this equation, and the numbers become truly staggering. At 29,000 barrels per day capacity, at an average price of $70 per barrel, these platforms should be generating $2 million in daily revenue. Over 10 years of shutdown, that represents $7.3 billion in lost revenue. Combine the maintenance costs with the lost revenue, and you get a total exceeding $8 billion. $8 billion lost while these magnificent pieces of engineering infrastructure just sit there, rusting away in the Pacific Ocean, producing nothing, employing no one, generating no tax revenue, contributing nothing to California's economy or energy security. In October 2015, just 5 months after the pipeline spill, ExxonMobil made what seemed like a logical move. They actually purchased the damaged pipeline from Plains All American for $578 million. The plan was straightforward: buy the pipeline, repair it with the most advanced technology available, and restart operations. They designed a comprehensive repair strategy that included smart pigs, which are sophisticated devices that inspect pipeline integrity from the inside using magnetic sensors and ultrasonic measurements. They planned automated valve systems that could isolate damaged sections within 3 minutes if any leak was detected. They would install fiber optic cables running the entire length of the pipeline that could detect temperature changes from potential leaks in real time. The estimated cost for these repairs was $123 million, and they projected an 18-month timeline. Simple engineering problem, straightforward solution. Or so they thought. What followed was a bureaucratic nightmare of truly epic proportions. The permit application process became a Kafkaesque ordeal that stretched on for years. The application for pipeline repairs alone ran 4,700 pages. The environmental impact reports totaled 12,000 pages of documentation. They were required to conduct 147 separate public hearings. They submitted 89 separate technical studies covering everything from marine biology to seismic activity. They responded to 3,400 public comments, each requiring detailed technical responses. They hired 200 consultants and expert witnesses across dozens of specialized fields. The permit process alone cost ExxonMobil $47 million over 7 years. And at the end of all that time, all that money, all that effort, they still didn't receive approval to restart operations. By 2022, after 7 years of fighting through the regulatory maze, after spending tens of millions on consultants and studies, after jumping through every conceivable bureaucratic hoop, ExxonMobil finally surrendered. They couldn't fight the system anymore. The regulatory environment had become so hostile, so unpredictable, so expensive that continuing to pursue permits was throwing good money after bad. This is where the story takes an even more bizarre turn. Enter Sable Offshore, a company created in 2020 by a businessman named James Flores. Now, Flores has quite a history in the oil business. His previous company, Sable Permian Resources, filed Chapter 11 bankruptcy in 2020 with $1.1 billion in debt. Before that, he ran Plains Exploration, which he sold to Freeport-McMoRan for $6.9 billion in 2012. That deal later became infamous as one of the worst acquisitions in oil industry history when Freeport lost $10 billion on it. So this is the individual who stepped up to buy ExxonMobil's California assets. The sale terms reveal just how desperate ExxonMobil was to exit California. The purchase price was set at $643 million. But here's where it gets truly strange. ExxonMobil is providing a $625 million loan to Sable at 10% interest. That means Sable Offshore only had to put up $18 million in actual cash. $18 million. That's less than the value of a single offshore supply vessel. ExxonMobil is essentially giving away $2.5 billion worth of assets for pocket change, and they're financing almost the entire sale themselves. The loan structure is absolutely bizarre and heavily favors the buyer. Sable doesn't have to make any payments until production actually restarts. If they never restart production, they never have to pay anything. The loan is secured only by the assets themselves, the very assets that cannot legally operate without permits. If Sable defaults on the loan, ExxonMobil gets the assets back, but those assets are completely worthless if they still cannot operate. It's a circular trap where ExxonMobil cannot win either way. As of December 17, 2025, just days ago, Santa Barbara County supervisors denied the permit transfers that Sable needs to operate the facilities. The situation has deteriorated rapidly. Sable Offshore has been cited for 5 felony environmental charges. The California Coastal Commission fined them $18 million, which represents the largest penalty in the Commission's entire history. They've received 3 separate cease and desist orders. Multiple state and federal agencies are currently investigating their operations. The criminal charges are severe and numerous. 5 felonies, alleging knowingly discharging pollutants between October 2024 and April 2025. 16 misdemeanors alleging streambed obstruction and unauthorized activities. The district attorney is seeking $50,000 per day in penalties, potentially totaling another $18 million. Sable's insurance company has indicated it may deny coverage for criminal acts, leaving them personally liable for these massive fines. Here's the kicker. Sable's contractual deadline is January 1st, 2026. That's just days away from today. If they don't restart production by that date, ownership of all these assets reverts back to ExxonMobil. Given that permits were denied just 2 days ago, a restart appears absolutely impossible. ExxonMobil may find themselves stuck with these assets all over again after already taking a $2.5 billion loss. You genuinely cannot make this stuff up. The irony would be hilarious if it wasn't so economically devastating. While this world-class infrastructure sits completely idle just 5 miles off the California coast, the state imports 1.07 million barrels of oil daily from overseas sources. Tanker ships arrive at California ports every 18 hours like clockwork. The Paracima Point mooring facility offshore handles very large crude carriers, each one holding 2 million barrels of oil. These massive ships burn 100 tons of bunker fuel daily, just traveling from Saudi Arabia, a 30-day journey that produces more emissions than the Santa Ynez field would produce in an entire year of full operation. Let me break down exactly where this imported oil comes from, because the sources are revealing. Saudi Arabia provides 238,000 barrels daily to California. Ecuador supplies 156,000 barrels from Amazon rainforest drilling operations that environmental groups somehow never protest. Iraq contributes 118,000 barrels from fields with gas, flaring so intense it's actually visible from space. Colombia sends 97,000 barrels from areas where pipeline attacks by guerrilla groups are common occurrences. California gets oil from literally everywhere on the planet, except from 5 miles off its own coast. The irony is so thick you could cut it with a knife. Foreign tanker traffic to California has increased 400% since 2015. The Port of Long Beach now handles 147 million barrels annually, up from just 31 million in 2010. Each tanker pays $1.2 million in port fees, but contributes exactly zero local employment beyond temporary dock workers. The oil gets refined in California, then often gets shipped back overseas as refined products, literally doubling the shipping emissions. It's environmental insanity dressed up as environmental policy. The economics are equally absurd. The Santa Ynez platforms could produce oil at $12 per barrel in operating costs. Saudi oil delivered to California costs $78 per barrel, including shipping. That's a $66 per barrel difference. Multiply that by 29,000 barrels daily production capacity, and you get $699 million annually in extra costs passed directly to California consumers at the gas pump. Over 10 years of shutdown, that's $7 billion in unnecessary expenses that everyday Californians have paid, money that could have stayed in the local economy, supporting local jobs and generating local tax revenue. By February 2026, energy analysts project California will import 1.3 million barrels per day, representing 75% of total state consumption. That means sending $100 million per day overseas for oil that could theoretically be produced locally with far lower emissions from transportation. Annual oil imports will cost California $36.5 billion. That's money permanently leaving California's economy, funding foreign operations and foreign employment instead of local jobs and local tax revenue. It's an economic disaster hiding in plain sight, and nobody in Sacramento seems to care or even notice. Here's something absolutely fascinating that nobody ever discusses in the environmental debate. The Santa Ynez platforms actually reduced natural oil seepage by 50% when they were actively operating. The coal oil point seep naturally releases 5,000 gallons of oil daily from seafloor cracks. This is a natural geological phenomenon that's been occurring for thousands of years. When platforms pump oil from underground reservoirs, they reduce the subsurface pressure that forces oil up through these natural fissures. University of California. Santa Barbara studies conclusively showed that beach tar accumulation dropped 70% when the platforms were actively operating. Since production stopped, natural seepage has doubled. Goleta beaches now see 170 tons of tar washing up annually, up from just 50 tons when platforms were active. Methane emissions from natural seeps increased from 10 metric tons daily to 27 metric tons. That's equivalent to the greenhouse gas emissions from 15,000 cars running continuously. The platforms actually improved environmental conditions by reducing natural pollution. Environmental activists conveniently never mention this inconvenient scientific fact. The employment impact extends far beyond just the platform workers themselves. Helicopter companies operated 6 daily flights carrying 20,000 workers annually to and from the platforms. Marine vessels made 900 supply runs yearly, delivering equipment and provisions. Catering companies prepared 328,500 meals annually for platform workers. Hotels in Goleta booked 45,000 room nights yearly for rotating crews. Auto rental companies leased 200 vehicles monthly to contractors and specialists. This was an entire ecosystem of economic activity supporting hundreds of families and dozens of businesses. The specialized workforce required for these operations is completely irreplaceable. Subsea engineers certified for saturation diving earn $200,000 annually and require a decade of training. Reservoir engineers with deep water experience make $180,000 and need advanced degrees plus years of field experience. Drilling supervisors with platform expertise earn $170,000 and cannot be trained quickly. These professionals take decades to develop. When they left California for opportunities in Texas, Louisiana, or overseas, that knowledge base disappeared forever. That expertise is gone and it's not coming back. Local businesses collapsed in the wake of the shutdown. Harbor Marine Supply, which had been serving the platforms since 1979, closed permanently in 2017. Coastal Helicopter Services, which had flown workers offshore for 35 years, ceased all California operations in 2018. Pacific Welding Solutions, which specialized in platform repairs and maintenance, declared bankruptcy in 2019. The Goleta Valley Chamber of Commerce reports 47 businesses closed with direct links to the platform shutdown. These were real businesses, real families, real livelihoods completely destroyed. Other oil companies watched ExxonMobil's ordeal very carefully, and they're following them straight out the door. ConocoPhillips abandoned California onshore operations in 2023. Shell sold its Martinez refinery rather than continue fighting California regulations. Marathon converted their refinery to renewable diesel production, completely eliminating crude oil processing. BP hasn't invested a single dollar in California operations since 2009. Occidental Petroleum is quietly marketing their California assets, looking for any buyer willing to take them. The exodus is accelerating and shows no signs of stopping. International companies won't touch California with a 10-foot pole. Total Energies of France evaluated purchasing the Santa Ynez assets, but walked away after initial assessment. Equinor of Norway, despite operating 140 offshore platforms globally, refused to even consider California opportunities. Petrobras of Brazil, experts in deep-water operations, publicly stated that California is uninvestable. Even Chinese national oil companies, typically aggressive buyers of distressed assets worldwide, won't enter California. When Chinese state-owned enterprises think your regulatory environment is too risky, that tells you absolutely everything you need to know. The technology sitting idle on these platforms represents billions in wasted innovation. Dynamic positioning systems that keep platforms stable in 100-foot seas. Subsea robots that maintain equipment at 1,000-foot depths. 3-dimensional seismic imaging systems that map oil reserves with incredible precision. Horizontal drilling technology that reaches reservoirs 5 miles away from the platform. All of it deteriorating from salt corrosion, representing decades of technological investment simply rotting away in the ocean. Alternative energy hasn't replaced this production, and it fundamentally cannot. California solar farms produce electricity, not transportation fuel. Wind turbines cannot manufacture jet fuel. The 30 million gasoline vehicles in California cannot run on batteries, at least not for decades. The infrastructure doesn't exist and won't exist for a very long time. The Port of Los Angeles needs diesel for 19,000 truck trips every single day. LAX needs 600,000 gallons of jet fuel every single day. Alternative energy currently handles only 4% of California's transportation energy needs. The other 96% still requires oil, whether that oil comes from 5 miles offshore or from 10,000 miles away. This is December 2025. ExxonMobil took a $2.5 billion loss and fled California. The platforms that powered the state for decades sit idle and deteriorating. The technology rusts. The workers scattered to other states and countries. The expertise vanished. The tax revenue disappeared. The imports soared. The costs multiply. In just days, on January 1st, 2026, this entire mess might boomerang right back to ExxonMobil when Sable's deadline expires and they inevitably cannot restart operations. The numbers tell the entire story here. Not political opinions, not environmental rhetoric, not activist talking points. Just pure mathematics. And the mathematics are absolutely brutal. California chose to import oil from 10,000 miles away rather than produce it locally with far lower emissions, far more safety oversight, and far greater economic benefit. It makes absolutely no logical sense whatsoever. This is policy-driven economic suicide, and every single Californian is paying the price at the pump right now.